I lived through the Vietnam era, where you used to get beaten up on the street for having a different point of view. We are in the promised land. I come from Israel, but trust me, this is the promised land. I'm the luckiest guy that ever walked the face of the earth.
Gene Simmons was supposed to be enjoying retirement after Kiss concluded its farewell tour, but instead, he has found himself making headlines once again. In just a matter of months, the rock legend has been involved in a car accident, testified before the United States Senate, confirmed plans for new Kiss music, and unveiled an ambitious project that could keep the band alive long after its members are gone. So why is Gene Simmons suddenly back in the spotlight? And what do these latest developments reveal about his future? Join us as we take a closer look at the reasons why Gene Simmons is back in the spotlight. The boy named Chaim. Before we delve into the interesting and scandalous reasons Gene has been making headlines, let's take a look at the horrible childhood experiences that shaped him into the man he is. The man the world knows as Gene Simmons, the demon, the god of thunder, the fire-breathing, blood-spitting co-founder of the most theatrical rock band in history, was born to Flora Klein, a Hungarian Jew who had survived the Holocaust and watched her entire family die in the concentration camps when she was 14 years old. When the war ended, she was one of only 2 members of her family left alive. She went to Israel, built a life, married a carpenter named Ferry Witz, and had a son. The marriage was troubled from early on. Arguments about money then resulted in violence. Young Chaim once bit his father on the knee when he saw him strike his mother. Not an instinct you would expect from a small child, but entirely consistent with the man that child became. Eventually, Ferry left, and Flora was left to raise her son alone, in poverty, in a country that was still building itself. They were, by Simmons's own description, dirt poor, scraping by on rationed bread and milk. By 7 years old, Chaim was picking wild fruit from roadsides and selling it alongside a friend to generate income. He was just 7 at the time, and he was already working. In 1958, when he was 8 years old, Flora made the decision that would change everything. She and Chaim immigrated to the United States and settled in Flushing, Queens with relatives. He didn't know how to speak English and had to learn it the way kids learn things when school cannot wait, through comic books and television, absorbing the language of his new country through the 2 mediums that were most immediately available and most captivating to an 8-year-old boy who was suddenly very far from everything he knew. He changed his name to Gene because Chaim was impossible for Americans to pronounce. He took his mother's surname of Klein. He enrolled in a Hasidic theological seminary, a yeshiva, at 9 years old, while his mother worked at a button factory in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. He was a scholar who transferred to a public school in Jackson Heights. Then that dynamics changed when he found music. He watched the Beatles perform on television and decided at that moment that he wanted to be a rock star. He wanted the larger-than-life version of fame that the Beatles had demonstrated was possible, and that his immigrant's imagination had immediately seized on as a target. His mother gave him his first guitar. He practiced constantly. He formed bands under names like Lynx, the Missing Lynx, the Long Island Sounds, Bullfrog Beer, working his way through the local music scene with the specific hunger of someone who understood, from personal experience, what it felt like to not have enough. Before Kiss, or any of the things the world now knows him for, Gene Simmons was an elementary school teacher in New York City. He taught 6th grade while working on music at night. His students had no idea that their teacher was going to become one of the most recognizable rock stars in the world. He had a day job because the music was not yet paying, and he was the son of a woman who had survived the Holocaust, a button factory, and immigration to a country where she knew nobody. In the early 1970s, he changed his name one final time. from Gene Klein to Gene Simmons, honoring rockabilly performer Jumpin' Gene Simmons. He formed Wicked Lester with Stanley Eisen, who would become Paul Stanley. Wicked Lester became Kiss, and the boy from Haifa, who had once sold fruit on a roadside to eat, became the Demon. He has said that every decision he made, he thought about his mother first. He also vowed never to break her heart and to make her proud. Gene did just that. He became the most commercially successful bassist in rock history. He bought both of his parents' homes when he had money to do it. Understanding where Gene Simmons came from is the only way to understand why. At 76, he simply cannot stop. The farewell tour that wasn't really goodbye. On December 2nd, 2023, Kiss played their final concert at Madison Square Garden in New York City. The end of the road farewell tour, which had begun in 2019, was delayed by the pandemic, extended multiple times, and eventually became the highest-grossing farewell tour in rock history. Gene and Paul Stanley had said goodbye in the building where everything had started, in the city where two immigrant and working-class kids had formed the most theatrically ambitious rock band the world had ever seen. At the end of that final show, something happened that nobody in that arena had been fully prepared for. Two digital Kiss avatars appeared on the stage alongside the band, lifelike, stunning, built by Industrial Light and Magic, the George Lucas-founded visual effects company responsible for some of the most advanced digital imagery in cinema history. The avatars were not a retrospective gimmick. They were a preview, a declaration that the farewell was specifically not the end. 2.5 years later, the full picture of what that signal meant broke across the music industry simultaneously and changed the conversation about what retirement looks like for one of rock's founding icons. The most ambitious thing Simmons has ever done. In April 2026, Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley appeared as the centerpiece panel at Polestar Live, the music industry's major annual conference in Hollywood, alongside their longtime manager, Doc McGee, and Pop House Entertainment CEO, Jessica Caravos. The cover story they gave to Polestar magazine's May 2026 issue confirmed what that final MSG moment had previewed. Kiss Forever, an immersive avatar-driven concert experience, is coming to Las Vegas in 2028 in a purpose-built venue designed exclusively for the show. The scope of what they announced was genuinely extraordinary. This is not a hologram concert in the way that anyone understands the term, or a projected image on a screen. Industrial Light and Magic has created avatars of Gene and Paul and the iconic face-painted personas of the Demon and the Star Child that are so lifelike that Gene described it by saying, "This will be virtually seeing us." The avatars would capture the physical specificity of Gene Simmons as the Demon in a way that every previous hologram experiment never remotely approached. Pop House CEO Jessica Caravos described the experience as a crazy 4D roller coaster ride through the hits, the comic book worlds and personas of Kiss, with pyrotechnics, LED displays, fire, heat, and environmental effects integrated into the show. Fire you can feel, heat you can sense. An experience that engages all 5 senses simultaneously inside a theater, engineered so that every seat in the building delivers the same immersive impact. No bad views, no distant seats where the spectacle loses something. The venue itself is being custom designed and built from scratch, not an adaptation of any existing Las Vegas space, but a purpose-built physical environment engineered for this one specific show. Pop House is the company behind ABBA Voyage, the ABBA hologram concert experience that has been running to critical and commercial triumph in a custom-built London arena since 2022. The Kiss deal with Pop House was reported to be worth over $300 million, giving Pop House the band's song catalog, name, image, and likeness rights, their iconic face paint designs, and their artist share of master recordings and publishing. Pop House's debut fund raised over $1.3 billion. This is not an experimental boutique operation. They are building something designed to run indefinitely and to eventually travel. Gene confirmed that while the show will launch in Vegas, the technology is designed to be staged all around the world. The Demon and the Star Child performed simultaneously in Las Vegas and Tokyo and London, without either of them getting on a plane, without the physical demands of touring that destroyed their bodies across 50 years of shows. That is the vision. That is what Kiss Forever actually is. Gene framed it with his characteristic directness. He told the Louder Sound that the great thing about being an icon is you can stay young forever. The end of the road, he insisted, was not the end of anything. The fans should start thinking about this as a new beginning. Pop House had not just bought the makeup and the tunes, they were planting seeds for a future that was meant to be bigger than the 50 years that preceded it. And then came the announcement that nobody had seen coming, the one that made it clear the Kiss creative engine had never actually switched off. The 2026 music. When the Kiss Forever announcement landed, most of the music world assumed the Las Vegas Avatar experience would be a hit show delivered through extraordinary technology. That alone would have dominated the conversation. But in his interview on the Kiss by Sienna podcast, Gene announced that Kiss had just recorded a new song written by Paul Stanley. They just recorded a new track that Paul wrote. He couldn't tell them more about it. It's coming out at some point. He had already confirmed this direction in the Polestar cover story, telling the magazine that the 2028 show would feature not only the classics, but new songs, written by them, with songs already done. This marks the first time since the 2012 album Monster that the band has actively discussed new studio recordings. The End of the Road tour had been billed explicitly as their final live performances. New music had seemed categorically impossible. The Avatar technology changes that calculation permanently. If the Demon and the Star Child can perform live forever through digital avatars built by the company that made the visual effects for Star Wars, avatars that look like the 1970s and 1980s peak versions of Gene and Paul rather than their 76-year-old bodies, then there is no physical constraint on how long Kiss can release and perform new material. Gene told Rolling Stone that fans should not think of Kiss Forever as the end of anything but as the phoenix rising out of the ashes. The ashes were the farewell tour. The Phoenix is a band that can now exist without the limitations of aging human tissue. However, not everything happening with Gene Simmons right now involves multi-hundred-million-dollar entertainment deals and cutting-edge digital immortality technology. Some of it involves the Pacific Coast Highway in Malibu and what happens when a 76-year-old man passes out behind the wheel of his car. Let's uncover the details. The car crash on the Pacific Coast Highway. On October 7, 2025, Gene lost consciousness while driving along the Pacific Coast Highway and struck a parked car. He was transported to a hospital, while the music world briefly held its collective breath. 2 days later, Gene was on X, delivering his verdict on what had happened with exactly the tone anyone who has followed his career would have anticipated. He thanked people for their kind wishes, confirmed he was completely fine, described the incident as a slight fender bender, observed that this happens especially to those of us who are horrible drivers, and signed off with all is well. His wife Shannon told NBC4 that his doctors had recently changed his medication and that Gene was recovering at home and doing well. A representative confirmed to People magazine that he was fine and back to work already. Not back to work eventually. Already. Shannon Tweed, who married Gene in 2011 after 30 years of documented non-exclusivity that she eventually drew a public line about on their own reality television show, has remained consistently present through every chapter of this period. Whatever Gene Simmons is publicly, the marriage appears to be one of the genuinely functional things in an otherwise chaotic existence. The crash wasn't the only shocking thing that Gene had experienced, and the next is a headline-worthy topic about him involving the United States Senate. Testifying before the United States Senate. On December 9, 2025, Gene Simmons walked into a Senate Judiciary Subcommittee hearing room on Capitol Hill and testified before Congress about legislation requiring radio stations to pay recording artists royalties for airplay. He was appearing at the Intellectual Property Subcommittee hearing on balancing the interests of local radio, songwriters, and performers in the digital age, a subject he has been publicly passionate about for years, and one on which he has considerably more expertise than most witnesses who appear before congressional committees. The performance royalty fight is this. Under current American law, songwriters receive royalties when their compositions are played on the radio, but the recording artists performing those songs do not. The songwriter and the performer are often different people. When Rock and Roll All Night plays on a radio station, the person who wrote it gets paid. The person whose voice and instrument are on the recording does not. Every other developed country in the world has a performance royalty for radio airplay. The United States does not. Gene Simmons has understood this disparity for decades because Gene Simmons has understood the music business at a granular, contractual, revenue-by-revenue level since the day Kiss signed its first deal. He is the man who licensed Kiss onto coffins and condoms and branded everything from lunchboxes to credit cards. He knows precisely the difference between what a brand generates and what its creators receive. His testimony before the Senate was not a celebrity appearance, but the output of 50 years of running one of the most commercially sophisticated operations in the history of popular music. CBS News covered his testimony alongside his Kennedy Center recognition, noting that he had become an increasingly prominent voice in the debate over artists' rights in the digital era. The irony of the most aggressively commercial rock star in history becoming a congressional witness on behalf of artists who are being commercially exploited is real and intentional. Nobody understands how exploitation works better than the person who spent 50 years making sure it was working in their favor. But while the Senate testimony was serious business, what happened in its surrounding coverage was not. He hit on a news anchor. During a television interview connected to his December 2025 Capitol Hill appearance, Gene hit on a news anchor on live television in what was described as a cringy encounter. This is not the first time something like this has happened. Gene Simmons has been doing versions of this since approximately 1974, and his willingness to stop appears to be approximately zero. He is 76 years old. He is married to Shannon Tweed. He is a Senate witness on intellectual property law. He was apparently also hitting on the person interviewing him about that Senate testimony. The seriousness and the absurdity coexist in him without apparent contradiction, and he seems entirely unbothered by how either registers to the outside world. Shannon Tweed, who spent 3 decades watching this behavior before issuing the ultimatum that eventually produced a wedding ring, did not publicly comment on the news anchor incident. This is what long-term accommodation looks like. While all of this was unfolding and making headlines, Gene Simmons was simply touring constantly. As a solo act, with his own band, in venues that ranged from casino resort stages to amphitheaters across the American Southwest. His February 2025 shows at casino venues included a performance at L'Auberge Casino Resort in Lake Charles, Louisiana, where he played Strange Ways and Rocket Ride, two Kiss songs written by the late Ace Frehley, for the first time with his solo band. The choice of Frehley songs carried its own specific weight. Ace Frehley and Gene Simmons have had one of the most publicly complicated relationships in rock history. Creative partners who built something extraordinary together and then spent decades disagreeing about almost everything that came after. Playing Frehley's songs in a solo context, honoring his songwriting with live performance, was a gesture that people who follow this history noticed. His summer 2026 tour schedule added dates in June and July across California and Nevada, with Sebastian Bach, Lita Ford, and Quiet Riot providing support at the Fresno show at the Save Mart Center and the Murphys show at Ironstone Amphitheater. That lineup, Bach, Ford, Quiet Riot alongside the former Kiss frontman, reads like a reunion of the generation of rock that Kiss directly inspired. Simmons was not merely headlining a nostalgia tour. He was curating a living document of what the rock music he helped build had become across 50 years. A man who formally retired his band from touring in 2023 is performing more dates in his mid-70s than many artists half his age. This requires a physical and logistical commitment that most retired 60-year-olds would find genuinely difficult. Simmons does not appear to find it difficult. He appears to find it necessary. Do you see Kiss Forever as a groundbreaking future for live music? Or the moment where rock concerts stop being real? At what point does a legacy band stop being a band? When the members retire? Or when the audience no longer cares who is actually on stage? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.